Okay, perfect.
Please, you sit in the middle.
So morning, everyone. So I'm sorry for my voice. You guys were a bit crazy last night, so I have to, I have to say everything I'm saying is off script. So you need to buckle up a bit. But this is going to be memorable this week. I'm having the pleasure to be with Dominic and Davidek, and we have a topic that came a bit yesterday around digital health. We were talking about it. And we are going to explore what does it mean for commercial ops and marketing in general, because usually it's this shiny object, sometimes a medical device that takes it because it's cool, or R&D, and sometimes it's medical affairs saying, oh, we have a project, observability, with patients. And here we are going to try to understand what does it mean for commercial ops. Can you just start maybe with a round of intro, what you guys are doing? I think, people saw you on the app, but that could be a good refresher.
Sure, happy to. So my name is Dominic James. I work for MSD. I lead our global digital health alliances and innovation team. And largely what that is about thinking about how digital technologies can close care gaps for patients. A little bit of background. My previous role, this is a new role for me. My previous role was leading our global marketing transformation. So many of the topics that we've kind of heard over the past 2 days, a life that I led previously. And then prior to that, I'm from out of industry. So my experience in kind of growth, innovation, digital has come from outside the healthcare industry. So it's kind of very interesting to be in this industry and seeing the challenges that we have here.
And Davidek, maybe you can, people knows you already, I guess, but can you maybe start answering with some definition? Digital health is a little bit
Well, from the scope I'll approach this conversation is around, once we have these amazing solutions, whether local, globally, how do we actually incorporate that in our portfolio of medicines to get it to the patients, right? So that's really the scope in which I would bring today.
And will you include also, any services for the clinical practice under this umbrella, or not necessarily?
It depends, but yes.
Yeah. Okay. So regarding now this positioning within commercial ops, do you see in your organization digital health as a potential service that can enter the mix, or a set of service that goes, along the pills, along the devices, that can provide value to patients and the caregivers?
Yeah, so I see it in both of those ways. I mean, the way I kind of view digital health and why do we care about it? Why do we even have this topic? Is if you look at the digital health industry, it's about a $300 billion industry now. Now, 5 years ago, it was about $50 billion. And then project forward to 5 years' time, it's going to be about $1 trillion. And to put that in context, $1 trillion, the whole healthcare industry, the whole pharma industry worldwide is about 1.5 trillion. So in order of magnitude, digital health is massive and it's growing massively. So kind of what does that mean from a commercial perspective? It means a couple of things. One, it's been promised for a long time, but now we're at a point where exponential growth is happening and is meaningful. So our environment in which we operate is transforming. And so we need to change what we're doing in order to work in this new environment. The second thing is, why is it important, is if you think about kind of what it brings, Davidek, you asked that question around generative AI. There was a question earlier around, to Mustafa, around, is AI going to be doing the prescriptions? If you think about kind of all of these things, from a marketing perspective, the channels, the opportunities, what we're going to do is like massively different. And so it changes kind of our industry, but then, you mentioned the point around kind of around the pill augmentation services. That's also another aspect. It's changing healthcare overall.
And there is a set of skills, I guess, that is coming with it. I think, Davidek, maybe you can help us, and Dominic, please interject, on the type of skills or the types of competencies we need to bring that. I mean, we think tech, right? When we think of digital health, they say, oh, there's a bunch of geeks we need to hire somewhere, or startups, to hang around. But it's not only. I mean, commercially, it's not the same things to include in the commercial mix, right? So do you see that as well as Roche? And please interject, Dominic.
Yeah, and Dominic, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. What we are seeing through the industry is we're talking about this subject early on in the disease cycle, right? So even early drug discovery, phase 1, phase 2, and I think that's where the opportunity for pharma and the role that pharma can play within this. You mentioned the industry's continue to grow. A lot of that growth is actually happening outside of the typical pharma, right? Because I mean, when you look at digital health, it's everything from telemedicines, apps, like it's a very broad bucket. But I think there's a huge opportunity for us to understand when we look at disease areas and tackling these, what companion products or things or services we can provide within that and actually run that through the clinical trials. And that's where you can see like some big companies are starting to look at it in that aspect. With that said, now it's more we're reacting to, hey, here's not a cool, but here's a good value add we can have, and how can we bolt that onto our potential portfolio? And I think that's not a sustainable, scalable way of looking at it.
Well, you're thinking as well that life cycle will make us dependent on choices, for different, assets that we need to identify from a commercial perspective.
Yeah. So the way so digital health kind of crosses, throughout the kind of the pharma life cycle. There's a lot happening in discovery with AI, but then through clinical development and then in commercial. In the commercial space, typically what we've seen happen is as you get close to LOE, companies need to find a way to differentiate. So then they do an add-on sort of digital service, which typically comes a little bit too late because they want to differentiate, but the runway's running out for them. And so consequently, you do something that doesn't quite get traction, doesn't really have the impact, and then you get a little bit of bad press out of this. What we're kind of finding sort of the opportunity is definitely kind of pre-launch. And if you think about it from what we're trying to solve for as an industry, we're trying to create better outcomes for patients through innovative medicines, right? That's what we're trying to do. But a lot of the barriers to patients actually benefiting from those medicines, things around kind of access, things around diagnosis, things around how they can navigate the healthcare system, things around monitoring, accessibility, all of these topics. And all of these are things that digital is helping with at the moment. Yeah. So in order to kind of reach that goal of better patient outcome, digital has a massive role there. And then if you look kind of earlier in the kind of the life cycle, that's where you can start to introduce these things and build evidence for them along in your kind of clinical development process. And that's where you can have a really more significant impact over the life cycle of the product.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And Haider, I know we've talked about this in the past as well, and this is something we're seeing where we're also trying to understand the business case around some of these solutions, right? So what are the growth drivers? Can it be growth revenue generating? And I'm curious from your aspects as well. I know you work in that space. What are your thoughts?
So for me, I think when you look at expanding, the access to population. So obviously, if you work with an ecosystem of startups, and I think this is where you are going to see a very regional and national play. I don't believe in the one startup or the one, entity you're going to globalize, even if headquarters love the idea of it. I think you're looking at a portfolio of assets. I think I like the fact that you say it is a journey and it starts at a certain point where the climax comes. I think that portfolio needs to be built and thought strategically on what can we drive inside, what are the docking stations that we want to build so that people from the outside can dock to us and that we can exchange value. And I think the industry, you guys can provide a lot of value from a compliance perspective, market access perspective, access to HCPs, hospitals. And I think that ecosystem can bring a lot of speed, data, right, consumer data, data points that are a little bit more lightweight in terms of importance from a clinical perspective, but that from a big data perspective, that could be interesting. I think that could, from a pharmacoeconomics perspective, right, if you are starting to build global value dossier and people are saying, hey, we need to build a case, that could be something that could be, striking in a therapeutic area sense. Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think, you make some really great points, Haider. There's, like some of the most kind of tangible use cases are really around kind of data reaching patients because, that's something very kind of tangible for our business. So, Those are kind of the more obvious, I would say, opportunities, or the ones where you can kind of prove impact. And then I think the challenge in this space is a couple of things. One is to kind of avoid a little bit of kind of innovation theater where you're doing things that look good but don't actually have an impact. The second thing is being too focused on the future that it doesn't seem to have a relevance to the business today. So a bit the challenge and the art, I think, of succeeding in this space is to be able to deliver something that has short-term impact but builds towards a longer-term vision. And you need to have kind of both of those pieces kind of working together in order to have any impact or any success.
And if I can add on this, there is this, I mean, from where I see a little bit from the outside now, there is a huge difference if digital health is being talked about by R&D, which has a long span of thinking, right, and commercial. So I can see commercial teams when they talk to corporate VCs and they say, we have 18 months to find something, right? And the pressure is there to really operationalize the value on the business case, right? And this is where it could be demonstrating, some observability around a treatment, adherence. And so it's very different when you are doing it, preclinical, right? And you're, building the road, driving the road, and basically observing the road. And I think this is where it's important on where you decide to strategically talk about that topic.
And do you have time for it as well? Because you understand the life cycle on that is long. But I mean, there's so much value in the space, specifically in our industry. A good example of that is recently in one region, Middle East, right? We created very quickly a breast cancer screening tool where we actually were able to help the physicians really identify up to almost 98% accuracy, right? Without that, I mean, you think about it. So I mean, there is some really good tangible use cases, but we are starting to look earlier within the life cycle on how we can play. So,
and there is, with the presentation that we had just before, something interesting from a commercial perspective. If you look at that conversion funnel, right, acquisition, conversion, retention, we tend to forget that those services, digital health, can be an incredible acquisition and retention also on the healthcare professional side. So if you have a good service, people will not just come for the good scientific literature that medical affairs has given you, right? So they are going to come also for the services that you're going to solve, for example, triage of patients, whatever that could help them in their daily life. So I think this is where sometimes we kind of see it as a cherry on the cake. I don't know if you feel that in your organization, like, it looks good on the brand plan, right? So let's put some stuff there.
So Dominic, you mentioned before, right, the expansion of this space. What role do you think pharma will play in this in the next 10 years, or can play?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. I love the question. Like, one is we're not going to have a choice. It's the ecosystem that we're kind of operating in. So often, in pharma, we view the world from our perspective. In marketing, it can be kind of even worse. It can be, how do we get our message to the kind of the physician, right? That's what a lot of people are kind of focused on. And we kind of forget about the ecosystem. So there's the first thing is we're not going to have a choice. And so the companies, at a minimum, you really need to understand the space if you want to kind of be successful in the future. And a little bit better than the minimum is you start to experiment and shape the space, right? And that's where the innovation comes from.
Coming back at you, Davidek, and in terms of vehicle to capture value, from a commercial perspective or from a Roche perspective, what did you create to basically identify, capture, and integrate digital health within commercial? Do you have innovation labs? Do you have scouts? Do you have dedicated people that are integrating this into the mix? How do you?
So we have an amazing personalized healthcare organization run by James Music and the team. With that, that's really embedded into our business and ways of doing things, right? So they're embedded in our disease areas, we're working with the life cycle leads, disease area directors, et cetera. So it's part of our DNA. With that said, so that's from a global perspective, but then locally, we have some amazing local affiliates, right, that are continuing to look for partnerships and collaborations, right? So it's both local and global. Okay. Ultimately, we're all driving in the direction of trying to meet a need, right? So it's not necessarily looking for the best business case, but how do we meet a need to help a population move forward? So that's kind of the interesting high-level approach.
So you have the best of both worlds, right? You have the global vision, but you still have the agility to basically focus and find what's necessary for China or what's necessary for the US. You have people on the ground doing that.
For the most part, yeah.
Same for you?
Yeah, and you know, there's a challenge with this is scaling, right? Because and what can you leverage from one market and take to another? You can leverage, say, some IP, or you can leverage a methodology or a way, but maybe you can't use the same partner in kind of both markets. So.
I'm looking at the time.
We're out of time.
We are out of the time. But basically, what I understand is you both organizations are pretty now open to collaboration with the ecosystem, right? So you're ready to basically embrace that, and you're already doing it with a quite strategic approach and how to deliver it, right, to the end of your vision, you know, with the HCP and the patient. I'm just looking at the room if we have questions. I'm just looking at the
Far
deck
right
there. Oh yeah, we have one. Oops, I hope it's not me. Do we have a mic? Yes. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. My throat is also not very good from last night.
Good party.
So I have a question looking at the future. Because I truly believe that, I mean, as companies, pharma companies, through digital health, we can really transform, you know, patient lives and healthcare ecosystems in general. So my question is, do you foresee a time when we bring to the market digital health initiatives, so we shape ecosystems, and then on the ecosystems, via digital health, we bring brands. So it's the other way around. Instead of bringing brands to the market, we bring solutions, and with these solutions, in certain ecosystems, brand A and B make sense. In other ecosystems, brand C and D make sense. So, like, completely changing the way we do business.
I can start. I mean, for me, what I see from, you know, 100 startups hitting us with pitch deck, the definition of what they call healthcare in the next 20 years is not what we call healthcare. So all this room, what I hear from all this new generation of people is they're saying, you guys as a failure system, you are basically fixing the failures. We are going to build healthcare as a new definition, which means keeping us healthy. I don't even want to think about sickness. And if you look at this, their solution is behavior maintenance. You know, it's very behavior driven, and it's education. And these are, I mean, we're not talking about pills and devices per se, but we're talking about, you know, apps and information changing behavior. And in that sense, I would say the brand, or because for me, Twitter and Google are brands, right? They are businesses and brands that are keeping our attention on. Those brands that are keeping your attention, being the first door to your behavior, will be the winners of tomorrow. And that's where you guys need to somehow connect to that bus that is going, yeah.
I was imagining digital health bringing services to address bottlenecks in the ecosystem and patient journey hurdles, and the real hurdles that, you know, all the players in the ecosystem feel. And then we would fuel this with some pills, with some medical solutions we bring. I don't know, this is thinking the other way around. It's thinking, solving the issues of the ecosystem, and then which solutions, from a brand perspective, do we also bring?
I understand. To finish this point, I have a huge issue in the healthcare system to go towards you. I work in fintech as well, since like a year or so, right? And in the fintech business, in the bank industry, there is an easier way to do what you are looking at, because we have Visa and MasterCard structuring the ecosystem. So if I want to create any startup and basically connect India to the US, Visa, MasterCard will create the highway to do it. I don't find the similar roads, you know, and it's not the FDA doing it, and it's not, you know, the EMEA doing it. So this is where I would say when we fix those roads, someone that is going to structure the ecosystem, that will be the one. I think the opportunity for you guys, per therapeutic area, because only pharma has the expertise around the molecules and the power to do it. I would say when you guys will take the lead on creating the ecosystem structure around TAs, that leadership that you guys bring is going to create a road for that ecosystem to do what you say.
Yeah, but to even build on that, right, there's a lot of data policy legislations that have to be done locally in order to enable that, right? And I think that's where, to your point, even to start that conversation of discovery, that that look at the data, you need to have that in place. So,
Correct.
and we're not there yet at scale.
No, no,
And
no.
that's more local government legislation.
Maybe just kind of quickly building on that point is, I think pharma companies, we have an amazing kind of reputation. We don't probably give ourselves credit for this. But, when you work with startups, which you do, Haider, one of the things they love partnering with pharma companies for is our kind of brand presence, how we're respected. Another piece is how good we are at clinical evidence, that they often struggle with that, our understanding of regulatory, our understanding of how to access. So we have actually a lot of strengths in this place that many of the tech companies don't. And so that kind of partnership that we can strike with them can really create much better impact and solve some of the challenges that we've been talking about.
Yep.
Cool. I think we're on time.
On that note, I think we have to leave you on this, and if you want to continue the conversation, please do. Right, we'll be at the tea and ginger, table to fix our voices. So Dario, we'll give you back the floor. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Have a nice one.